I have many, many topics to discuss tonight. Is there any particular one that you would like to start with?
Well, I think I'd like to start with his death,
Sure.
just to clarify what really happened for him. Because there's been lots of articles out about the possible piano wire. It actually was a rubber hose catheter that was wrapped twice around his neck and tied in a knot. And supposedly he just sat on the edge of his bed and died from a suicide. But he always said in his lectures, and to me personally, that if they ever said he committed suicide, you'll know he was murdered. And
Right.
certainly that's what happened.
Absolutely. There's an interesting story that you and I have been talking for the last couple of days. I got in touch with you the other day, and it was just so awesome to be able to reach out to you, and you'd agree to come on the show, because so many people out there, like myself, who are just, we believe everything that Phil has said. And the incident that you had told us about how he was discovered, and the initial report that was given, did you want to elaborate a little bit on what the initial report was given and how it came to be that this catheter tube was found?
Yes, I was called late one night on the 17th of January in 1996, and I was told that he had died of a stroke and that he was, deceased and had been that way for almost a week. I made arrangements with a funeral director to take his body from Woodburn, Oregon, which is where he was living, to Portland, Oregon, where I was living. And later, the next day, I went to the funeral director and I said I wanted to see the body just to kind of make sure he didn't have a gunshot wound to the head or something, because his life had been threatened and he was talking about top government secrets. Well, the funeral director said he knew the coroner and he knew that the body would be okay, but he would check it for me. He didn't want me to have to look at it because it was decomposed a little bit there. The next day, the police called me and said his body had been taken to the medical examiner, that the funeral director had found something around his neck. The coroner had never gone to see him. Now, in Oregon, if you die at home, your body has to be examined by the coroner or his assistant, and that was never done. So that was the first clue right there that something was really wrong with his death. Later,
Okay.
the medical, yeah.
Also, to reiterate here, you had told me that he was, there was allegations that there was a woman going to his apartment where he was living and was giving him shots for MS.
Right. In Oregon, we had a special experimental program for multiple sclerosis, and Philip had been diagnosed with that, along with a multiple number of other problems that were going on for him, but in specific, that one. So he told me he was in an experimental program with the Oregon Health Sciences here in Portland, Oregon, and a nurse came in and gave him a shot every week for the multiple sclerosis experimental drug. And sometimes he would call me and he would say, I really can't see Marie, his daughter, this week because the shot made him so sick. Well, after his death, I wanted to get all the medical paperwork. I went to his personal doctor, and I went to the University of Oregon's hospital, and they said he was never in their program. So he was being given shots. Yeah, he was being given shots by a nurse that was a fake. This was not an authorized program.
So they had no record whatsoever of any of their nurses on their staff going to give this experimental shot to Phil.
That's correct.
So we have no idea who this woman
basically,
was.
right, and I think this is the same woman that was involved with his death later on, and also that we saw after his death during when we were all together discussing his death at a church. We looked out the window and there was this woman in the car with long blonde hair, and I'm pretty sure it was the same person that had been involved with giving him the shots.
My goodness, that's just, there's so many subjects that I don't even know where to start.
And I killed two of them. Yes, they're mortal and they do die. However, in the process, one of them did this. All I remember is that he just kind of waved his hand in front of his chest, and the next thing I know, this blue beam hit me and just literally opened me up like a fish. And burnt my fingers right off of me. And it was some form of electrical force, because the kind of like being hit by a lightning bolt burned all my toenails off of me. Completely crispy crittered my left foot. Burnt the shoe right off of me. All I remember is the smoking remains, and I'm still conscious, but in and out of, I didn't remember much. And there was a Green Beret that was right behind me that risked his life. In fact, he died. But he risked his life. He shoved me back in the basket and hit the button and took me up. I wouldn't be alive talking to you today if it wasn't for him. I'm forever indebted. He lost his life. 66 Secret Service agents, Green Berets, Black Berets, crack troops lost their lives because the government, our United States government, lied, did not tell us anything about the alien threat. There's a war underneath there, and I'm talking dead serious. It's been going on since that time. Since late August of 1979, our military, the Russian military, basically the militaries of the world, have been in constant conflict with the outer space alien.
Mr. Meyer's evidence, I believe, we can all agree far surpasses what the typical abductee or eyewitnesses typically possess. However, I realize that sometimes, no matter what the evidence reflects to disbelievers, they will still think it's nothing more than an elaborate hoax. I have one rationally logical question for you all to carefully answer. When is a liar's life ever in risk from the powers that be?
And one follows along the other closely enough so that you know that either the Talmud of Emmanuel was the source of the Gospel of Matthew, or that it's a 20th century hoax based upon the Gospel of Matthew. So I've been spending my 14 or so years since 1983 examining those two possibilities, and I can only conclude that there are several hundred reasons that indicate the Talmud of Emmanuel was genuine, the source of the Gospel of Matthew, and it was no hoax.
What is the most convincing reason?
Well, it's mostly the accumulation of evidence of each of these 300 reasons or 320 reasons by itself may not be totally convincing, but you put them all together and they're overwhelmingly convincing. These range from very minor things that scholars have picked on with the Gospel of Matthew, that you read through the Talmud of Emmanuel and you find that the mistake isn't there. The Talmud of Emmanuel reads something somewhat different there that was heretical. The compiler, the writer of the Gospel of Matthew had to alter it to make it compatible with his own beliefs and the beliefs of the early Christian church. And so in so doing, he made some little mistake here and there that some scholars have picked up and written about in the literature. And then you can find that the Talmud of Emmanuel just doesn't suffer from that error. And this happens over and over again with a lot of minor things. But then there's the major things that explains how Jesus, whom I call Emmanuel, how he could have had appearances after the crucifixion. Well, the biggest heresy, I guess, within the Talmud of Emmanuel was that he survived the crucifixion. Of course, this is in accordance with a lot of legends that say he traveled around Anatolia or the Turkish area and eventually farther east and on to the India Kashmir region, where he lived a long life and finally did die and was buried in a tomb in Srinagar, Kashmir in the early 2nd century. So we have these major things that the Talmud of Emmanuel explains too, how those legends got going, how the disciples insisted that they had seen the risen Jesus, the risen Emmanuel, in the days following the crucifixion, several different appearances, and why these appearances in the different Gospels are all slightly contradictory to each other. This was a very sensitive item. Each one had to be edited by its Gospel author to be sanctionable, and through that editing they all differed from each other in one way or another. So the scholars have tended to discount the post-crucifixion appearances of Jesus totally. Most of the modern scholars do for that reason, although in so doing they're just saying that, well, where there's a lot of smoke we don't think there was any fire, which is not a very good reasoning to use very often. That's just one example of one major thing. There's too many others. One major heresy, well, one series of heresies is that the teachings of Emmanuel, I would say, were altered and distorted because they were unacceptable about 85% of the time. And this is because he taught about spirituality, taught about the existence of the human spirit, its evolution over lifetime after lifetime, which meant he taught about reincarnation. He taught about eventually perfecting yourself in spirit, zillions of lifetimes into the future, becoming almost one with a true God, which he calls creation in the Talmud of Emmanuel. All that had to be edited out, leaving the writer of the Gospel of Matthew to substitute all kinds of stuff in its place, in particular talking about the kingdom of heaven or the kingdom of God, wherever the Talmud of Emmanuel would talk about the realm of the spirit, the realm of the human spirit. That alteration was pretty successful for him. There weren't too many complaints about that, but now and then it would lead him into trouble. Something didn't fit the text right, and he would go on with the text and then find that there's a contradiction, and the contradiction would be picked up. One of the contradictions that comes to my mind is early in Matthew, Jesus is quoted as saying that you shouldn't swear. You just should say yes, yes, or no, no. Just don't swear by anything. Then about 18 verses later in the Gospel of Matthew, he says, if you're going to swear, don't swear by the gold in the temple, but it's the temple that makes the gold sacred. And if you're going to swear by God, it's because God is the God of everything. In other words, he contradicts this earlier spot, and you can compare this with the Talmud of Emmanuel and find that the Talmud of Emmanuel was consistent throughout. This is what there's hundreds of examples of in the Talmud of Emmanuel, indicating that Emmanuel was a logical teacher. He had to teach spirituality in as logical a way as he could. And this probably wasn't too easy to do.
I was sitting outside the window of my room, looking outside, seeing people passing back and forth in the Ashoka Ashram compound. And then I turned towards my right on the path directly in front of the Ashoka Ashram. I saw two people walking slowly on the path towards the youth hostel. That's where Billy was staying. And the two person was Billy Meyer, and on his side was this woman that later on I came to know that it was Asket from the Dahl universe.
This is the path where Billy walked from the main gate to here, and this is where I saw Billy, Maya, and Asket from the Dal universe came and walked here, and both of them slowly walked on this path towards the Ashoka Youth Hostel where he was living at that time. Yes, he was walking around in the Ashoka Mission. So I saw them walking. I think one time I saw them in front of the youth hostel and they were looking behind something. Do you remember in some occasion you saw something and both of you looked the right? I don't remember because I saw it from afar. I don't know what occasion, but that was why I took a close, or at least staring at her, because I kind of knew her. In front of this youth hostel, Billy, Maya, and Askat used to stand here and talk. And in this corner here, I used to see them, both of them, standing and talking. And I was in that corner near the Bodhi tree over there. And standing behind that tree where the pond used to be underneath that. And looking this worth, I saw both of them standing and talking, and at one point both of them together turned towards the main road. When I was about 8 or 9 years old, I had an experience, or a couple of experiences that were very interesting to me. I would have a very beautiful lady visiting me in my bedroom when my brother and I go to sleep. She would come and impart certain knowledge, certain learnings to me through a non-verbal communication. I could, describe it as something that was directly transferred to me without words. And this went on for a few nights, and I just took it as something very natural. Being a child, to my child's mind, it was very something that was natural and was wonderful. When I had my experience, it was not something, for me it was very natural. I have seen a lot of ships over the temple, or over the, we have a large area over the trees, near the well, on the doghouse. All these areas that I have seen the ships, sometimes it was very low. I could see a huge, it's almost like, one time I saw maybe half of this room size of the ship. And sometimes I see very small, further away. It was nothing strange. It was not something that caused me to run with excitement to ask some adults or my grandfather or my ayah or my governess what I see. It was a very natural phenomena for me. So when I had experiences with Asket, it was also not something very unusual or strange for me. It was almost, it's the most natural, but it's almost like a return to some known, familiar state. This is the main temple here, without the front covering of the ashram. We used to look up. Sometimes in the evening you can see the ship station right on top of your head. Sometimes the ship would be seen on this direction. There were lots of more trees from here to that area, but we could see it from usually at night or early in the evening when it was hardly any sunlight left. I have seen for a few times UFO over the Ashoka Ashram. One time I saw just some kind of a disc-looking, blitzing out in and out of the sky. It was early evening, so it was not quite dark yet, and the
the disc look very, it's almost like a round, but it looks kind of dark against the sky. So and it was moving fast in and out of the clouds and changing position many times, and after a while it went away.
This is one of the phenomena where hundreds of people saw this. This one, I think, had been witnessed by a whole, I think maybe 100 people. Even was written in the Indian newspaper in the 60s. Actually, one reporter was dispatched from the newspaper, I think the New Statesman or something. If we dig, we could find the article. He came, talked to the villagers, talked to people who work at our place, and was shown, and even talked to Billy and was shown the photos. And he wrote an article about this and interviewed a lot of eyewitnesses. I saw quite a few like this. You know, in the summer when it gets hot, we sleep with the, remember charpai?
Yeah.
The bed, the string bed.
Yes.
Outside, and looking up always. Sometimes I see.
Yeah.
In the summer. Oh, this one.
That's the same time as this one here. It's maybe a half a minute different.
I see. As far as I could recall now, she looks very much like, of course, like one of us, but to me, she was not very big or very tall. Slim and long, dark hair, like dark brown hair, and kind of beautiful and delicate somehow.
You usually find that people that are not telling the truth are evasive. They look away to get their answers and things like that. Mr. Meyer looked me square in the eye and answered every question, looked right into my soul when he answered the question. He gave me simple answers and very direct answers. He gave them to me in English, and I was convinced that he was telling me what he believed to be the truth. Well, I became more convinced that the photographs were real when he took me over all of the photographic sites, and I could see that there's no place to suspend lines into the scene. The hill dropped away at a steep angle. There were no anchor points. There was no way that he could have thrown it into the scene, because I saw scenery on the side of each image area that was greater than you could throw up a small model into. Also, it wasn't pushed up from the bottom, and I became convinced that there was no way I could figure out that anybody could get models into the scene. We found that the metal, which we tested in several metallurgical laboratories, not just one, we found that the metal was unique, that it had unique properties, that most metallurgists agreed that it could not have been made on this planet. The sounds were unique. We went to the biggest sound bank in the world, the Groton Naval Sound Research Laboratory, Groton, Connecticut, run by the Navy. It has all the sounds in the bank that you can get. They're computer controlled. When we put the UFO sounds into the bank, it couldn't find a match. The piece that we put in there was the sound recorded when the Mirage jet was making passes on the alien beam ship. And the computer matched the sound of the jet engine, gave us the model of the jet and the engine that it was using. It gave us a police siren, a European police siren that was used in certain countries. It gave us a Junkers Ju-52 flying in the area, which we didn't hear on the tape. I didn't hear it. Meyer didn't hear it, but it was there. They gave us a report. It reported that a Swiss Pilatus Porter reconnaissance plane was in the vicinity, and also recorded the sounds of the jet engine. Gave us all of this information, including that of a barking dog, which we could hear the barking dog, but a lot of sound information that was imperceptible to us was all discovered by the sound bank. So that was quite unique. And then when we took it to sound technicians to find out what kind of sound it was, they had some problems. They couldn't find out how many emitters were involved. One idea there was 8, another concept was that there were 24 simultaneous emitters to produce the sound. The sound had random wavelength and random, what's the other, amplitude of the waves, both at the same time. And this was something that would be relatively impossible to do. They concluded that it would take 24 separate synthesizers working together to reproduce the sound. Now, those synthesizers are very expensive equipment, and no laboratory had more than one. The biggest laboratory in the world at Groton only had 2. At 10 o'clock at night, and he said, I must go out and have a cigarette. And so we went outside to sit down in the fresh air, and there was a car seat beside the door. And we sat down on the car seat. And just as we sat down with Mr. Myers right by my left shoulder, he was suddenly pulled across my lap like that. He went, ugh! And he started to get up again like that. I said, what's the matter? Are you having a heart attack? At about the time that he was pulled across my lap, we felt debris in our hair. And I thought that it was a rat in the rafters of the barn there. And at that time, we heard the shot. We've already been sprinkled with sand. And then we heard the shot. He said, that was a shot. And he turned around and looked, and there's a fresh hole in the wall. He put his finger in it. He says, it's hot. And he says, let's find the bullet. And he got up and pulled the car seat out to find the bullet behind the car seat. I'm thinking, why are we doing this? The gunman's still out there. Why don't we crawl inside and get something to protect ourselves? And so we went in and we got a big flashlight and a rifle and came out. And when we went to the point the noise came from, we found where the ground had been packed down. Somebody had been standing out there shifting his feet like this for some time, and after the shot there were running steps leaving the scene.
Mr. Myers' story is one that still continues to this day, which proves without doubt it's quite literally the most consistent first-person story of the UFO phenomena to date. Like many of you know, unfortunately, his story has never and will never receive the attention it deserves from the voice leaders in social media, which reflects ignoring anyone is still the easiest way to keep the masses from understanding the truth. I leave you all now with another super interesting piece of evidence a logical person can't ignore. Some of Mr. Myers' photographs were presented by famed auction house Sotheby's for sale. I believe we would all be in agreement that the price they were asking would be irrational for fake photography.